Okay, in this class we're going to be looking at some more advanced functions of the tracker and putting an element on this garage door that is behind the van. And so let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read in this DPX file here and open its properties. And we can see that its frame range is from 100 to 330. Now, if we click on the start at, we could have that start at frame 1, but it's actually more preferable to have it start at a later date, such as, or a later time, such as 1000 or 1001. In that event, or in that case, in the event that the director adds additional frames, say an extra 20 frames to the beginning of the shot, for editorial reasons, when we bring that back into comp, then we won't be into negative frame numbers, which would be the case if we started at frame 1. Otherwise, we would have to manually adjust all our keyframes. So in this case, we could just move the start of the comp back to frame 80, since it's starting at 100. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, with my mouse over the node graph area here, I'm going to press S. And that's going to bring up this property setting, which brought it up on my main monitor. Apologies for that. And I'm going to go ahead and change the frame range in the viewer to match the frame range of our clip. And I'm also going to set the full size format to HD 1080, which is also matching the size of the clip. With that, I'm going to hit OK or hit close and right click on this in and out to clear those in and out points. So we already covered the trackers in class, but I'm going to quickly review that. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to note that this, as you can see, has a red, green, and a blue channel, but no alpha channel. So it's my working habit, and it's a good habit to get into, to always add an alpha channel to an image, because that'll save you some problems down the road. So I'm going to go into this channels menu here. See the 3 little dashes are channels. And I'm going to grab a shuffle node. And I'm going to shuffle 1 into the alpha. So now you can see we've added an alpha channel. And if we hover over the viewer with our mouse and press A for alpha, we can see we've flooded it with white. And you can see our channel selection being mirrored up here. Red for, oops, that's read. Red channel, green channel, blue channel, R for red, green for green, and B for blue, and A for alpha. So with that in mind, shuffle in the alpha channel, and I'm going to go to the transform menu and grab a tracker. Now there's multiple ways to get nodes. You can of course get them from these toolbars. You can right click and access the toolbars here, and you can also hit tab and type in the name of what you're looking for. Oftentimes you'll remember the name of a node, but not where it lives. So tab is a great way to do it. I will likely grab a lot of nodes that way through the course of this class. So the first thing I want to do here is I'm going to track 4 points on this garage, preferably the corners. So I'm going to just go back to the beginning here, and I'm going to use this button to set a tracking marker on somewhere that looks like a good tracking point of high contrast. So this looks like a great point. High contrast, definitely a nice defined pattern that the tracker can lock onto. Since this shot moves a lot, I'm going to just enlarge its search area just to give it a little helping hand. So I'll just hit the track forward button and kind of watch it. See, it gets a little confused when it crosses these branches here and goes a little off the path. Oops. Okay, so here we have it, track. Not exactly what we were looking for. It did not stick to our points. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and set some additional keyframes. Now you see we have keyframes set on frame 100. I'm going to set one at the very end on frame 330 and say to Nuke, this is where I want you to end at. And I'm going to go, say, back to 250, set an additional keyframe on 250. I'll set one here on 166 as well. Looks like it's pretty good there. I'll set one on 175. And then I'll set one by this other branch here as well. That's kind of a confusing area right here, so I'm just going to go ahead and set it right there, I think. Now notice I'm setting the keyframe on the point I'm tracking, so it won't do me any good to set keyframes on different points. Seems like we have something weird happening here. 100 to 330. Interesting. Okay, so the issue with why this was only seeming to go to 230 was because I had, when I was showing you the start at function, I did not set it back to expression, so that was causing it to actually go from 1 to 230 instead of 100 to 330. So I've corrected that, and now I'm going to, and I retracked tracker 1. I did not make you watch that, which is cool because, watching tracking is, it's not terribly exciting. So I'll go ahead and just set another track here, and I'm on frame 330. I'm going to make the pattern a little smaller and the search area a little bigger. And since on the last one, we kind of had to track through some problems, we're going to do the keyframe assisted tracking here and just kind of point Nuke in the right direction. Since we know the spot we want it to track, we'll set a few keyframes to guide Nuke in the right direction. And we'll go back to frame 1 or frame 100 and set that last keyframe. Now notice the points I'm picking. I picked this point because it's a little bit higher contrast and this is a bit muddly. And where this edge meets this edge, there's bound to be some perspective shift as the camera moves from the left to the right. So with keyframe assisted tracking, I've now set these keyframes. I'm going to go ahead and click this. Now this is going to track through all the keyframes. If I were to click the track current key, it would track from 100 to 150. If I was on 150, it would go back to 100, track to 150, and then continue on to 201. So that's the difference between these two buttons. So I'll go ahead and track all the keyframes, which will start at 100 and end at 330. And I'm watching it in this pattern window here. We can see we've kind of lost the plot there. Oh, it's back. And it's back again in between keyframes. It seems to be having a bit of a problem. But we'll go ahead and correct that. So one feature we can do here to detect that area where the problem was we can turn on our little stoplight and it's going to go ahead and show us the error in each key here. We can also visualize that in the curve editor in the track 2 here. Here's the error, and it's pretty small, but if we select it all and hit fit, we can see that in this area here and this area here, there's a large amount of error. And I'm guessing that's where it kind of jumped the track. Sure enough, it is. So with these three selections here, this will set a new keyframe when I move the tracker. As you can see, create new keyframe, I'll move link, and this will automatically retrack it. So sometimes this can be a bit annoying when you don't want it to automatically retrack, simply turn it off. But in this case, I'm just going to move it to my point and let Nuke retrack in between those keyframes. Yeah, it's not doing a killer job, is it? Oops. To error. Let's see. Definitely bad right there. So I'll just move it over my point and release, and it's going to retrack it. Oh, see, we'll just go through and find all these red points here where it lost the plot. There we go. Okay, so I went ahead and tracked in the last track and corrected all the errors on track 2. So now we really need a fourth track on this corner down here. So how we're going to approach that is we're going to go ahead and create a track. We're going to guess where we think these two lines here intersect. And we'll use the Command Option hotkey to turn that on and create a track. And we'll make the search area a little bit bigger, as we've done before. And we'll kind of guess where that is. Now, we can't really track this because this is not planar. This is perpendicular plane to the garage, so it's going to not track at the same rate as our other trackers. So what we're going to do here is create a tracker offset, and that's going to track one of the points on the plane, but plot its position down here. So we'll go ahead and hold Command, and drag out this. You can let go of Command once you've drug this out. What this is the offset line. So we'll go ahead and we'll find a good point to track our offset from. And again, we want something with pretty good contrast and something on the same plane. So we'll track this point again and just offset its position down there. We'll go ahead and use the keyframe assisted tracking in combination with the offset. I'll just go ahead and set a keyframe every 50 frames. Or thereabouts. So since we've already tracked this point, we know it's going to work fairly good. And there is a way to take that track's existing tracking data and copy it into this track and then use some expressions to offset it in X and Y. But for now, for a basic Nuke user who's just getting started, it might be easier just to create some keyframes and track it through rather than try to get into expression linking and expressions math. Okay, away it goes. So now we've created a pretty successful track, and again it has a little error. So in the curve editor we can go ahead and look at the error graph here and just say fit. Part of the reason, and this is 0.003 of a pixel error, so part of the reason the error is so high is because of the motion blur. Obviously here's a high error. It's the point we're tracking is completely occluded behind this stick, so you would expect the error to be pretty high when you can't even see the point. Again, high error, can't even see the point. So let's go look at some of our other high error points. And we still have our little stoplight turned on, which is kind of telling us where our bad areas are. And as we can see, the bad areas are marked in red right here. Occlusion, high motion blur there. Okay, and turn that off. I'm okay with this. So the next thing I want to do is I want to select these four trackers here, and I'll just go back to frame 100. Well, I'll go to frame 330. No, we'll go to frame 100, and we'll create a corner pin 2D on the current frame. So we'll just hit create, and let's close that tracker, and I'll set it up to the side. So now we have this. I need to read in another element. So let me grab my elements here. Okay, so I drug in these elements. These are basically just some pictures that I acquired off the internet. I suggest you do a search for your own images and find something you like. Now, if you just drag them in and drop them, and then select them all and press L for lucky, they'll all line up in a nice line. and you can select one, press 1, and get the viewer onto it and view it. So depending on how post-apocalyptic we want to go here, we can select which element we like. So I'll take this image and connect it to the corner pin that we created from the tracker. So remember, we'll select all of the 4 tracks that we wish to use, because you may have more than 4 tracks in here. Select the 4 corners that you want to use, and then create the corner pin from the tracker. Next, we'll connect that corner pin to our image. And there's no change when we view it through the corner pin. So we'll open the corner pin's properties, and here's the animation. If we go to the From tab, we can see the From tab is also animated. So we'll just change that to Set to Input. Now we can see that the input size is 2048 by 1536, and that's been populated into the From tab. So it's now taking those corners and remapping them to our tracked points. So next, let's just do a quick slap comp and slap this together to see what we got. I'll press M for merge to create a merge node. And the merge node will allow us to put these 2 images together by putting A over B. And now we'll wire that up and we'll view the result. And now we have this A over B. So that's not quite what we're looking for. Let's go ahead and continue to work on this stream of the image. So the first thing I'll do is I'll view it again. And with my mouse over the viewer, I'll press F to fit. And I'm going to create a roto node by pressing O. And the roto node is in the Draw tab here. See, O for roto. I'm just going to grab a quick Bezier and cut out some of this stuff here. And definitely the urinals. We'll get rid of those too. Disgusting. But the good thing about bathroom wall graffiti is that the walls are generally white. And this will allow us to do use some mathematics to combine this, rather than have to either key this procedurally or roto it out, or otherwise create some kind of math. We'll be able to do it procedurally with multiplication. So I want to kind of get rid of this urinal pipe as well. I think I'll keep this one. Okay, so now I've drawn this roto, and I'm viewing it, but it's still there. And the reason it's still there, well, now it has an alpha channel. So what we need to do is pre-multiply this image by its alpha channel. And we do that by doing a pre-mult RGB8. So now it's removed the unwanted pixels outside of our Bezier. So let's take a look and see what we got. Okay, that's starting to get us there. But next, I think I'd like to change this from over to multiply. Okay, so now that's interesting. What we need to do is we need the whole image to multiply properly. We need this whole 1920 by 1080 size here to be white for it to multiply over this. So I'm going to go ahead and create a constant node, constant, and I'm going to set the color to white. So 0 is black and 1 is white. And as you can see, the box will change to white. Okay. And I'll set its format to be the format of this picture as well, which I believe is 2580 2048. Okay, we'll set it to be that size. 2048. Okay. And I'm going to grab a merge node. And I just want to put this moving image over the white. So now we have this. And we can see that actually our white here is not very white. So let's go ahead and accomplish that with a grade node. So we'll get a grade node from our color correction menu. which is here, or we can also use the hotkey G, which is good since we use grade nodes all the time. It's good to be able to call them with a hotkey. And I'll go ahead and I want to remap the white point to actually be white. So I'm going to take the color picker. I'm going to select the color picker there and do a Command Option Shift on the grade node, which will allow me to select the color from the node above the grade node. And that did not work. Let's do, oh, it's black. Oh, let's do it again. Option Shift. Oops. There we go. So now that's kind of interesting. So now we're remapping this color to be white. And as we can see, as we move over it, there's actually values in here. If you look right here on the red, green, blue, and alpha values, we can see that there's actually values in here that are way above white. So we don't want them to be above white. We just want them to be 1. So if we select the white clamp option, it will clamp all the values at 1. So now when we look at this, now we have our graffiti stuff here, and we can go back and refine this grade node later. You can always change everything later. Nothing is set in stone. I mean, it may be harder if you get too far down the rabbit hole, but let's go ahead and multiply that over the top and see what we have. Yeah, that's kind of looking kind of cool. Let me go see if I can go look at that some more, maybe get rid of some of this up here. Okay, so I just Command Option Shift clicked on that to do that. Now we might not fully like the placement of that, which is fine. We can just add a transform node, T for transform. We can just add a transform node above the corner pin. Remember, any transformations we add should be above our corner pin because this is our animated node. And let's just move this down. Some tall kids wrote that, right? I'm going to push that over. Actually, I'll push that right there. And I'm going to add a little softness to this Bezier as well. Just a few pixels. Well, that actually didn't seem to help us much, did it? Go back to 0. Oops. This area is not working very well. So actually, we can put something else there. I'll just adjust my roto a little to get rid of that weird area. We'll just kind of try to keep the areas we like, but get rid of that weird area there. And if you hold down Command, you can feather out these. Well, don't think I want to do that either. I'm going to select that point and reset feather. In fact, I'll select all those points and reset feather. Okay. Okay. Some weird stuff going on here. Well, this might not have been the best graffiti choice, but it's causing a weird artifact. But we'll carry on and we'll deal with that in a second. The next big issue we have to worry about here is getting rid of this fan. So, as we witness, this plate is moving everywhere, and it may be very difficult to draw um, an articulated, animated shape to cut that van out and put it back over the top. But since we've tracked this already, we can go ahead and use the tracker to our advantage. Let's go back to frame 100, and in the transform tab, we'll set this to the current frame. Okay, next we'll go ahead and select all these trackers to calculate the transformation and the rotation of the plate. When you select all the trackers, it'll generate an average, and we'll average the motion around these tracks. We'll then create a transform stabilized, and we can either create a baked or an expression linked, like our corner pin is expression linked. It doesn't matter. So next, let's move those to the side. I like to build down and to the right. So if I'm going to build a new branch off, I want it to go down and come in from the right. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and branch this right off the top, like so. So now I have a stabilized transform, and I have a match move. If we view the stabilized transform, nothing has changed on frame 100, since that's the frame that we set to be the 0 point in the transform tab, or in the tracker tab, I'm sorry. And if we look at that again, we can see that frame 100 is the 0 position, so nothing has changed on frame 100. But as we move through, we can now see the shot is relatively stabilized around that point. The motion blur hasn't gone away. There's really not much we can do about that at this point. But let's go ahead and get busy with rotoing this. So first, I'll just create a roto node by pressing O. And from looking at this, I can see that there's two distinct shapes. There's the side of the van here and the tire, and then there's this mirror, which is on a different surface, a different plane. So it's going to kind of have its own sort of motion. So what I'll do is I'll just start by creating a roto shape of the side of the van. So the edge that covers the garage is the most important edge here. And the rest of it is not terribly important. So I'm going to go full screen for this because I like to be able to see my roto. I'm then going to set this setting down here to 12. Now what this will allow me to do is jump through the timeline 12 frames at a time. And the reason I set it to 12 is because this is 24 frames per second, so that'll give me a keyframe every half a second. We can then go through and set keyframes on a quarter of a second if necessary. So I'll go through and roto this and play this part of the video at a little bit sped up speed, so you don't have to watch me actually roto, which is quite boring to watch. But before I do that, I'll just show you the quick methodology I'm going to use. Since I know this car doesn't really change shape, I mean, it's not an organic object like Jello or a tennis ball or something that will actually change shape. It's just changing perspective. I'm going to try to not move any points individually. I'm going to set my control point there for now. If you hold down the command key and, if you hold down the command key and drag this, you can set the center pivot point anywhere you want. So for now, I'm going to set it right there. And as I move through this and move it, I can see it's a little off right here. So I'm going to hold down Shift and grab this, and I'm just going to skew the bottom of it to be a little bit better in line with that tire there. And I can see it's come off at the top a little bit. So maybe skewing that wasn't the best idea. Oh, that tire we can probably get away with In any case, that's the methodology that I'll try to use throughout this roto. Although I have a feeling that maybe moving some individual points might be the way to go. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll go forward. I'll change this to a 6 real quick, and I'll go forward 6 frames and then change it back to 12. And now I'm going to go through and fine tune my roto a little bit just by hitting these intermediate frames to make sure everything is lining up. And as we can see in the middle frame here, we already have a little bit of a weird error. I didn't really stick to my methodology. I ended up moving these little groups of keyframes individually. So for something like this, it's not too big of a deal. But sometimes when you're doing bigger roto jobs, it's much easier and it helps the interpolation if you can just adjust the shape as a whole rather than moving individual points. So bear that in mind if you're trying to roto somebody walking or just doing a job with a lot more shapes and a lot more interpolation where you want the shapes to interpolate better over time. Okay, so once we have our roto shape done here, we can see we have a white alpha here. So let's replace this alpha channel with this alpha channel, which is the alpha channel we just created. So to do that, we'll go again to the channel menu, and instead of getting a shuffle, this time we want to get a copy node. And it has a hotkey because it's quite popular because we often need to copy channels in. So let's copy the alpha channel in. K for copy. And we want to do exactly what the default is. We just want to copy the alpha channel to the alpha channel. So we'll input A for alpha, and copy that into the B stream. And this is the B stream. So it's just like a merge, A over B. So now you can see that we've taken this and replaced it with this alpha channel. Now by applying the match move, which is the inverse of the stabilize, we've now match moved it back to the motion of the plate, which is everywhere. It would be nice if it had a little bit of motion blur. So Since we've tracked this and we know the plate has considerable amounts of motion blur, we can go ahead and add that in two ways. Firstly, by selecting the Bezier, we can go to the shape motion blur here and just select this right here. So see, it's motion blur. So we'll turn that on in the shape. Perhaps it have to be in the roto tab. Oops, there it is. So now the shape has a bit of motion blur across its animation, but it's not animated a whole lot since we stabilized the plate. But we'll go ahead and turn on the animation in, not in Tracker 2, but in Match Move 2. So here's the motion blur. If we simply set that to 1, then it will give us a pretty nice sample of motion blur, as you can see. So let's go ahead and preview that. 0 and 1. And it gives us a nice blurry edge. And of course we can sample that additional times, but 1 is usually sufficient. Nuke has a great 2D motion blur system. So now that we have this alpha channel, we could copy this channel back into the pipe over here and use it as a mask here, or we can also just pre-mult it and then merge it back over the plate. So let's go ahead and do that, since that's probably the easiest way to do it. Under the merge menu, we'll grab a pre-mult, and once we stick the pre-mult on there, voila. It multiplies the alpha channel by the original pixels. Anything is white is fully opaque, and anything that is 0 is fully transparent. Thus we have this resulting image with fully opaque and transparent areas. Now let's keep everything nice and tidy and drag this little network down here, kind of nestle it in there. And let's grab the merge node. Again, M for merge, located here. And then we want to do the default over operation, the simplest operation. Let's put A over B. And if we view that, here we have it. So we've now cut out our van and put it back over the top of our graffiti so that our little graffiti appears on the garage behind the van. Oops. And you can see we have some nice motion blur areas here where it moves. I didn't do the mirror quite yet, but let me go in and do the mirror real quick. So I know Roto's a bit tedious. I'm actually going to work backwards on the mirror. I know Roto is a bit tedious, and you think, oh my gosh, you know, I can't believe I have to go in and draw all these little shapes and do all this manual work. Isn't, you know, VFX supposed to be cheating and automatic? But the truth is it's not automatic, and you have to have some skills to do this work. And it is a lot of hard work. So don't be afraid of it. Just, you know, the reward is creating the effect and making everything work. Once you create a nice effect and nobody can tell, you know, how it was done or that it's an effect at all, you know, that's a great feeling. You know, even if they can kind of tell it's an effect or it's obviously an effect, you know, it can still be cool. I mean, Optimus Prime is obviously an effect in the Transformers, as were all the Transformers, but still quite cool. So, don't be afraid of the work. It's the moral of that story. And remember, nobody ever got good sitting around thinking about it. So as you can see, some of the roto, we can scale it by dragging on the corner. We can scale just one, you know, like horizontally or vertically. And if we hold down the shift key and then drag these, we can skew it in those directions. So those are some handy handy roto controls to know. And with the mirror, I'm sticking to my methodology and doing it all as one shape. And I'm not going to go through and do the intermediate keyframes on this just for the sake of speed. This class is probably running a little bit long for what it is, so we'll go ahead and put the mirror in there, and that should be sufficient. We know it's tracked in. Oh, and remember, if you do forget to do a roto shape like I just did, you have to go back and view it through the stabilized, because that's what you're rotoing on, is the stabilized, right? You're downstream of the stabilized, so everything downstream of this is stabilized until here, and it's match moved. So if you were to roto it on the match move, it wouldn't line up. I mean, the shape would line up, but it would line up with what you're viewing, but it wouldn't line up with what it's affecting. So real quick, I'll grab another one here. I quite liked this one. So since the van has to go over the top of everything, let's go ahead and go into the drawer and create a quick backdrop node. After you select all those, it automatically goes around them. So let's go ahead and grab the corner of it, and we'll give it a quick label. Call it van, and we'll just move it down to the bottom. And now we'll grab a second graffiti piece here, and we'll copy and paste this corner pin since we know that that's our match move corner pin. And we'll view it. We'll go ahead and set this to input. Okay. We'll view this, and we'll grab another roto node as before, and we'll just loosely roto this out. And it defaults to have the Bezier on, so pre-mult RGBA, boop, and away it goes. And now we'll put the grade on there. And we'll remap the white points to be something a little bit wider. We'll grab it there, and we'll turn on white clamp. And then we know we're going to want to move it around, so let's put a transform in there. And then let's copy this network, because we're again going to merge it over white and then multiply it over the garage. So this is the way we don't have to draw a million little rotos to get that out. Wow. So first of all, right out of the gate, let's go ahead and scale this down a little bit. And we are getting this strange little edge. And I think that the reason for that is because these images don't have an alpha channel in them, and we're pre-multing RGBA. So let's go ahead and grab a shuffle node and see if we can correct that by just shuffling a white alpha channel in above the pre-mult. That seemed to help a little, but something weird is still happening. I'm going to copy that and paste it up here too. It's always good to add an alpha channel to images that don't have one. Well, that certainly didn't help. We've color corrected an unpre-multiplied image for one. That's kind of bad. There we go. You shouldn't color correct unpre-multiplied images. That was my mistake. Whenever you're color correcting an image with an alpha channel, always unpre-multiply it by the alpha. Basically what that does is allows you to grade the image without affecting the alpha channel. So that's what was resulting in that white edge. So, you know, it's problem solving. Little things happen. little mistakes creep in, and then we just have to figure out why they are. You just have to use our knowledge to kind of figure out what's making them do their thing. So let's fill in this place here where we were missing some of our graffiti before. And we'll put it right over the top with some of this stuff where it's cut off, actually, because you know how these graffiti kids are. Those darn graffiti kids. They like to write all over each other's stuff. So we'll put that one there. It's pretty nice, actually. I kind of like that one. Let's put it up there. So let's go ahead and gamma this up a whole bunch. And we can view it from here. And we can see that the black point of this is probably, and this as well, it's probably a lot darker than the blackest blacks in our plate. So let's go ahead and gamma it down too and see what's going on. Maybe this pink might be a little bit too bright. So let's drop another grade node under here and unpremultiply it by RGBA. And let's go ahead and adjust the gain a little bit. Oh no, I guess we don't want to do that, do we? We don't want to touch the white point because the gain is going to be mapped to the white point of this image. So let's try with the gamma. See if we can just darken it down a little bit without affecting our multiplication. We'll gamma it up a little bit, make it look a little bit more faded. Okay, that looks pretty good on that one. And let's actually lower the lift of this a little bit too. Or raise the lift. Try to take some of the curse off of these blacks. The blacks are a little bit too black, I think. I mean, they're as black as the shadows, but these aren't shadows. This is graffiti, and I don't think it really needs to be that black. So let's add a grade on this bottom one, unpremultiply. It's in parentheses because it actually doesn't unpremult, does the color correction, and then re-premultiplies it. And you can actually unpremultiply any mask channel you want, but since an alpha channel is usually what we're dealing with, you know, with the roto, we'll go ahead and do that. So let's see here. What do we want to do? Just lift the blacks a little in this one. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's do that. So now, one more thing is we have this big box outside here with this dotted line. This is Nuke calculating pixels that are outside of the format area. And if we just move the viewer up, we can see where that's occurring. It is occurring here, but is it happening here? So it's happening there as well. Is it happening here? It's happening here as well. So let's go ahead and see if we can correct that one node at a time. We'll take this first multiply, and we'll set the bounding box to be the B input, which we know is the plate at 1920. So let's do that. So that corrects that there as we would expect, but maybe the same problem is happening again. Yeah, it is. So that's because of this constant, I believe. So let's go ahead and just set this to be bounding box B as well. Now, Nuke's not going to calculate pixels outside of our format area, which on a comp like this is probably not going to matter terribly, but when you start getting into bigger, you know, more complicated composites with tons and tons of nodes, you know, calculating 100 pixels this way and 100 pixels this way outside of the format that you actually need to render is going to cause your renders to slow down, you know, and you know, nobody wants that. We all want like fast renders, and you know, we all want to go home and see our friends and stuff like that. So, so yeah, There's some graffiti on the garage. You could add more, you could add less, you could track, something onto this car. But one last thing we need to do on this comp before we start rendering it is if we move through, we can see that there are some heavily motion blurred areas as we have discussed throughout this recording. So everything's getting pretty motion blurred except our graffiti. So what we want to do is we want to go into our corner pins here and turn on the motion blur. And we'll just set that to 1. And now, as you can see, the motion blur is now on the graffiti as well, which will help it match into the plate a lot better. So now the graffiti is now blurred with the plate. So see, not too blurred. So that's pretty good. And now on really heavily blurred frames, it also becomes heavily blurred. So, and our roto could maybe use a little bit of work as well. But, not too bad. Par for the course. So, that's basically it for this lesson. To get this out of Nuke, you would just basically go ahead and create a write node, and the hotkey for that is W. Oops, not that. So just hit W, and you create a write node. Now, you can render from anywhere you connect this. It's going to render whatever it sees. So if the viewer's connected here and the write node is also connected here, it's going to render this. If you rendered it from right here, it would only render this. So I hope that is obvious, which it may not be if you're not used to nodes. So I'll just go ahead and append a write node. And remember, the first thing we want to do is create a file path. So I'll just put this here on my root level. I can make a folder, called like van comp. So I'm creating a new folder, and then I'm going to call it like van underscore, comp version. So I always like to add a version 001, because when they want changes, it's good to keep a record of all the things you've done. So there's version 1, here's version 2, here's the changes you asked for in version 3. Oh, you liked version 2 better. Then you have a version 2 render and a version 2 comp. I always version up my scripts when I go to the next round of changes. So, you can render this out as anything. I find it better to render my stuff to DPX, so I'll do present 0 4D for the frame padding .dpx, and I'll render this out as a DPX image sequence in the Cineon color space, which when we look, we can see that we read it in. It was also set to Cineon, which is correct. It's been transformed into a Cineon color space. And 10-bit is fine, so it's a 10-bit image. So we'll render that out to DPX, and then I'll go ahead and take that into Hero and use Hero to make MOV files if that's what the client wants. If the client wants DPX, then this is fine. I'll just send them a DPX. And I'll also use the DPX to create whips, which are works in progress, and previews inside of Hero. So after you put in the file path and set it to the correct color space, if it's MOV, you have MOV options. You simply go ahead and click the render button, and you can render custom, which is you can type in your own numbers. You can render what viewer 1 is seeing, which if there's in and out points that will be reflected in this. And the globals are what we set here in the S. When you press S and access your project settings, the globals are set to that. And then the input is basically the input of the plate. So I'm not going to render this, but that is basically the process for rendering that. I think in the next class we'll go ahead and look at some technical color grading as well as some creative color grading before we get into green screen extractions and that sort of thing. So until next time, happy comping.